Hello, everyone, and welcome to Into the Fold bonus content. If you're receiving this podcast episode, it's not really a full episode, it's a special, very short. We are doing this for our subscribers. So thank you for being one of our subscribers. Thank you for being a supporter of Fold. As conversations come up, as we want to have little like side conversations, we're going to create these bonus episodes for our followers. So this one comes from something that Lynn recently experienced at a market.
Yeah, so in September, we Fold often goes to the Brampton's Farmers Market, and so we did that this year. And we have this button that we like to give out, and it says "I read banned books." It's a really cool button. A lot of people really love it. But we also got a couple questions that I at least took me off guard. So some people were asking, "What are banned books? What does I read banned books mean? Do I want to read banned books, or are books that are banned good or bad?" And because I wasn't prepared for that question, I stumbled through an explanation that probably wasn't that great. And so we figured, okay, let's take some time, really think through how do we explain what banned books are, this whole issue, and give a more fulsome explanation. So that's what we're going to do.
Right, banned books. So we also have a line of apparel called Read Banned Book Society. And this was also a conversation we had when we were coming up with this, is just this idea that we often put out there, like read banned books, and not realizing that some people might not know what a banned book is. And I think this is important to discuss. Basically, in a number of school boards, books can be banned or challenged. Those are, I think, the two terms that are commonly used. And banned means the librarians are not allowed to carry them in the space. And challenged means sometimes they're removed from the shelves, or they're hidden, or they're put in different areas, or a certain school might remove them, as opposed to a board-wide ban, because of their content.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's the school board that does this, and sometimes it's like a government mandated thing. So the provincial government in Alberta, this is like an issue that's been happening in Alberta and being talked about in Alberta right now, but also in the States. It's happened a lot in a number of different states down there.
Florida.
And the content that is cited as problematic is usually content having to do with marginalized folks. So it's content that talks about the history of Black Americans and Black America having to do with slavery, or it's content that has LGBTQ characters in it. And so this idea of that, this stuff is sensitive and not appropriate for children of a certain age, is what we're trying to grapple with, right? And from speaking from like a LGBTQ perspective, there's a lot of association with that. Like, if something is labeled LGBTQ, it's necessarily sexual and graphic in nature, and that's not at all the case. I mean, yes, there are some books and content where it can get very graphic and sexual, and so I should know that very well, familiar with that. But there's a lot of really cool children's books and picture books with LGBTQ characters that have no mention of sex or anything like that, like zero graphic content. It's really just this character happens to be gay or lesbian or bisexual or trans or whatever, or it's explaining what does it mean for two people of the same gender to love each other, and it's just explaining in a very age appropriate way what does it mean to be queer or LGBTQ.
Yeah, and so I think there's sort of two things to just pay attention there is whenever books are being banned, marginalized communities are more likely to be the target. And it's writers of color, it's queer writers, as we were saying, that are often the target. I remember Lawrence Hill talking about the Book of Negroes being banned from schools because it talked about slavery, because the word Negro was in the title, when all of his references were based on historic accuracy. Sometimes it'll be that books with the N word are banned. And I remember Angie Thomas talking about that with her book, when her books are about racism. So someone using the N word in a book being the reason that book is banned, when the conversation is about what happens when you're called that name on the street and how does the character respond. These are like really coded and not so coded ways of rewriting history, telling a different, like happier, easier version of history, and also limiting the numbers and access that marginalized authors have in terms of public spaces like schools and libraries. And so I know we have an event at Fold, a virtual conversation that'll be happening on YouTube called Building Brave Libraries, Creating Inclusive Bookshelves in Challenging Times, that's really going to grapple with some of this. What are the things to be aware of? What are the things to be concerned about? I'll also say, having grown up in a Christian community, still being a Christian myself, there's a lot of ways that bans are used to, like, they'll say things like, if we have these books, they're normalizing fill in the blank. And the truth is, like, it is normal. Like, this is life. And so there's this weird way in which oftentimes faith-based communities are trying to curate what kids read and see in order to curate a particular version of the world that they want. And I think that that becomes really harmful when it's done at the expense of other communities, other spaces, other beliefs that have an equal right and equal access to live in this country and to be able to have their lives respected and valued.
I think that's the
Yeah.
thing when it comes to parents saying, like, I don't want my kid reading that. It's like, okay, well, that's fine.
Don't.
You don't have to let them read that. You decide which books your kids get
Yeah.
their hands on, but that doesn't mean you get to tell everyone else what their kids get to read, right? So
Or what gets to be in the library,
exactly. So
like
it's like
the public library.
exactly. It's a public library. All sorts of people have access to that. And so
Yeah.
they should be able to access the books that speak to them, that represent them, that they want their kids to read. So part of it is also this idea of like freedom of speech, right? And I think that's this challenging thing where everyone's like, what does freedom of speech mean? Like, what are there lines? Are there's like, is there a limit to freedom of speech? But I think in this particular context, it's very much like, don't tell other people what they can and cannot read by taking things off shelves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, so I think like when we say I read banned books or I'm part of the Read Banned Books Society, it's us taking the word banned books, and where other folks have said, we want to ban these books because they're bad, we're saying, I'm going to reclaim that term, and actually I like the bad books, so I'm going to read the bad books, I'm going to read the banned books.
Yeah.
And so it's a reclamation, I think, of that term that has previously, or maybe in like mainstream, has had a negative connotation.
Well, it's also turning readers into very cool rebels, right? We're often like nerdy, cozy corner, or leave me alone type people. And so the idea that we're like rebellious and dangerous because we're reading particular books, I think is really appealing. And I also, I think that reading banned books. I mean, I don't know statistically, I don't have access to the information, but I remember hearing that books that are banned actually like perform well. You know what I mean? The more you ban a book, essentially the more people want to read it in some ways. And so that's always the interesting thing with me too, when people go to these efforts to ban books. It's if the goal is to keep people from reading it, it's actually not successful. But if the goal is to rally other people who share rather bigoted or closed-minded or non-inclusive ways of thinking, that's what it does. And that's the really harmful part. It can also, I will say, from an author perspective, the authors I know who've been banned, it pulls them into conversations that take them away from their writing in ways that I don't think are fair. I know David A. Robertson has had his books banned or challenged. I know Daniel Ramadan has had his books challenged and or banned. Obviously, Angie Thomas had some of her books banned in Canada out east. And the process for going through that, from finding out and realizing, a lot of these authors wrote books so that the challenges they went through as kids, the things that they endured as kids, wouldn't need to happen again, you know? Um, Danny is a queer Syrian refugee. David is an Indigenous author. Angie talks about as a Black American. You know, they wrote books so that kids who look like them, who have lived through the things they're living through, would know that they're not alone, that they can get through it, that they can navigate it. So the idea that people are coming along, random people are coming through and saying, my kid shouldn't read their book and no kid should read their book, is really a kind of really aggressive assault on their work, on their intellect. And I know in the cases that I've shown, I've seen them post videos saying how hurtful it is. And that's the kind of thing that we just want to raise awareness about.
Yeah. So that's what banned books are.
You remember that commercial with the star? On Saturdays.
No.
So I used to watch a lot of shows on Saturdays. And on Saturdays, there was like Saved by the Bell and all those shows. And they would wrap up with the star that was like, the more you know. And then they would show like, don't do drugs and random commercials like that. So this is that.
All right.
The more you know.
Great. Awesome. Cool.
Bonus content.